So I wanted to do some discussion about the spacing on these bridges, specifically the Mexican standard one, which is what we're looking at right now. But we're also going to discuss some other sizes. So I wanted to show first how to measure the size of your bridge so that you know what you need to do to replace it to get an appropriate size. So to measure, we want to place the ruler so that 0, which begins right here, lines up with the center of this screw, this first intonation screw. And we measure to the end of the last intonation screw. So we can see that this is 2 inches, and it makes it to the very first mark, which is a 1/16 of an inch. So we know that this bridge is 2 inches and 1/16 of an inch. So that was just to measure the space here between the strings. This is how you measure the spaces between the strings. But if you need to know what bridge to replace this with, then you need to also measure your screws. Now, and I know that in a Mexican standard, the space is exactly the same. So it's again 2 and 1/16 inches. But I'm just going to show you. So again, we measure from the center of this first screw to the center of this last screw, and you can kind of see it is about 2 and 1/16 of an inch. Now here we have a Squire Affinity series Stratocaster, and I'm going to do the same measurements here just for curiosity's sake. Okay, so I can see again that the spring distance is 2 and 1/16. So I'm going to do the screws as well. And again, I can see it is 2 and 1/16. So the Squire Affinity series bridge is the same size as the Mexican standard bridge. So what we're looking at here is a vintage block with vintage saddles, the same one we showed in a previous video. So I'm just going to go measure this again the same way I did before, and I can already tell this is about 2 and 1/16. And then we're going to measure these as well. Again, 2 and 1/16. So this would fit in either one of the previous guitars I showed. So here's some notes I took on bridge spacing, both with springs and screws. So as we noted, with the made in Mexico standard, the string and screw spacings are the same. With an American vintage, which we did not show, it's 2 inches and 7/32 of an inch. So just a little bit larger, but noticeable. And again, they're both the same. With an American vintage narrow, it actually has the 2 and 1/16 for string, but 2 and 7/32 for screw. The spacing is the same for an American standard, but that uses studs, not screws, so it's not compatible. So since we're on the topic, I figured we'd just go over briefly the differences in different kinds of saddles you can get. So the very first saddles that Fender used came out in 1954 with the launch of the original Stratocaster. That went from 1954 to 71, and those were the patent pending steel saddles. Today they're hard to come by, but you can buy reproductions on Amazon for about $50, or the raw vintage ones for about $70. Then from 71 to 81, they used a less expensive cast metal. And reissues from this time, and even today, still use this kind of saddle. And lastly, we have the Made in Mexico, Made in Japan saddles, which also have the Fender stamp. These are made in Taiwan, but are licensed by Fender. They're also extremely common and pretty inexpensive.